The House of Hollow Whispers. The wind howled as Ethan stood at the edge of the long-forgotten property, clutching a worn duffel bag and a letter that felt heavier than it should. The October air bit through his thin jacket, but he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the house, no, the relic before him. The Holloway estate had stood untouched for nearly 20 years. The locals called it the House of Hollow Whispers, a name passed down in mutters and warnings. To Ethan, it was just Silas's place, a man who had once been family, if only by blood and not affection. The structure slouched behind an iron fence, 3 stories of brick and sorrow. Ivy strangled the sides, and tall windows stared back at him like blind eyes. Even from the street, he felt its presence, watching, waiting. His mother had never spoken much about her uncle, only that Silas had lived alone, retreating from the world after some unspoken tragedy. When he died, the only thing he left behind was the house, and a cryptic note to Ethan. "You are the last of us. The house belongs to you now. Find the truth. Free what I could not." Ethan hadn't planned to come. He didn't want this house, this legacy, but then again, he hadn't wanted much of anything for a long time. Grief had hollowed him out after his sister's death. She had been the anchor to his drifting life, the one who pulled him out of bed, who forced him to keep moving. When the cancer took her, something in him dissolved. College became a blur. Friends disappeared. Professors gave him final chances. This house, bizarrely, had become one of them, a condition of his academic leave. "Go," his advisor had said. "Get out of the city, find space, process things." Now he stood in front of a place where silence seemed to breathe. The gate creaked as he pushed it open. Gravel crunched underfoot, the overgrown path winding past dead hedges and trees that looked like skeletons. The front door was tall, weathered oak, engraved with symbols too faded to read. He unlocked it with a key Mrs. Henderson, the realtor, had reluctantly mailed him with a note scribbled on the envelope. "Be careful in that place. Some things don't like being disturbed." The interior was darker than expected. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Time had sunk its claws into everything: faded wallpaper, cracked portraits, warped floorboards. An enormous grandfather clock stood silent in the foyer, its hands frozen at 3:12. Ethan's footsteps echoed unnaturally as he explored. Every room was a time capsule: untouched furniture, stacks of letters tied with ribbon, a tea set still resting on a silver tray as if its drinker had simply vanished. And the soundlessness. It was complete. No creaks, no groans of settling wood. Just a kind of muffled pressure, as if the house were holding its breath. He found a study on the 2nd floor that seemed more recent than the rest of the house. Fewer cobwebs, papers still organized. A large desk sat by the window, covered in notebooks filled with cramped handwriting. He read the first line. "They're not ghosts. They're something older, something forgotten." Ethan set the notebook down with a tremble he didn't understand. The bedroom he chose overlooked the west lawn, which was less a garden and more a tangled graveyard of weeds and thistles. He collapsed on the bed, not bothering with the sheets. The air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. His sister used to keep lavender under her pillow. He slept. and the house listened. He awoke in the middle of the night to the soft sound of a creak. Not the wind, not his imagination. A definite creak. Close. He sat up, heart hammering. The darkness was thick, almost soupy. His phone's flashlight flickered once and died. The batteries had been full. Then came the whisper. Not a word, just a sound, breath without voice, a hush drawn from a throat long rotted. Ethan stood slowly. The whisper came again from the hallway. He opened the door. The corridor stretched longer than before. Impossible, but real. He took a tentative step forward. Halfway down the hall, he found the source of the sound, a painting. It depicted the house just as it was, but the people standing in front were not any he recognized. A woman in mourning black, a child with hollowed-out eyes, a man whose face was smeared with something red, not paint. Below the painting was a nameplate, the Holloway family, 1891. As he stared, a whisper brushed his ear.
You are not the first.
He spun around. Nothing. When he turned back, the painting had changed. The child's head was turned now, looking straight at him. Ethan didn't sleep the rest of the night. He sat on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped around his knees, staring at the closed bedroom door as if it might breathe again. The morning light was pale and colorless, leaking through the curtains like it didn't want to be there. He stepped into the hall again, hesitant, half expecting the corridor to be unnaturally long, but it was normal now. The painting was still there. The child's head had turned back. He spent the morning exploring the study. Silas's notebooks were written in a feverish looping hand that grew more erratic the deeper he went. Most entries were mundane, weather reports, complaints about creaking pipes, but every few pages the tone shifted. She walks the west hallway again, third night in a row. I hear her humming, sweet, low, mournful. I thought it was grief. Now I think it's habit. The house rearranges when it's lonely. I moved a chair and the next morning it was back. I've started leaving little gifts in different rooms. Apples, coins, they disappear. I don't know if they're spirits. I don't think they were ever human. Ethan's unease deepened. Was this the rambling of a man slipping into madness, or a careful documentation of something unexplainable? Behind the bookshelves he found a false panel. Inside, old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a torn family tree. Most of the names were crossed out. One had a dark circle drawn around it repeatedly. Margaret Holloway, 1892, age 10. Next to it, a penciled note, the first to hear them. In one photo, Margaret sat on a swing beneath a willow tree that no longer stood. She was smiling, but her eyes, there was something in them. Not fear, not sadness, something like awareness. Behind her, half in shadow, was a woman in a bonnet and heavy dress. The caption read, Margaret and Miss Ashcroft, governess. Ethan flipped through more articles. A fire in 1903, a series of disappearances in 1911, an inquiry in 1937 into Holloway heirs, vanishing before reaching adulthood. The common thread? Silence. Questions unanswered, investigations closed quietly, and always the house remained. That afternoon, Ethan wandered into the west wing. The air there was colder. He entered what had once been a nursery. Walls pale blue and cracked, a rocking horse resting on its side. On the wall was a faded mural, a forest drawn with care, and at its center a house that looked just like this one, but older, cruder, almost ancient. Beneath it, a small phrase painted in shaky hand. They never left. That night, he heard the humming. It was soft, sweet, childlike. It came from the nursery. He followed it, heart in his throat, armed with nothing but a flashlight that flickered more with each step. As he reached the nursery door, the humming stopped. He waited. Then, footsteps, tiny ones, on the other side. He opened the door. No one. But the rocking horse was moving. Not gently, not like it had been bumped, but in steady rhythm, forward and back. Forward and back. Ethan backed out and closed the door. His hand was trembling. Then just behind him a voice. Not whispered, not cruel, but clear and curious. "Do you know their names?" He turned. There stood a girl. Pale dress, bare feet, hair neatly braided. She looked no older than 10. Her eyes were the same as the child in the painting. "You're Margaret," he said, breath catching. She nodded once. "I stayed too long. They liked that." "Who are they?" She looked past him, down the hallway. "They were here before us, before this house. We woke them when we built over their bones." Ethan's skin prickled. "What do they want?" She looked at him with a sadness far too old for her face. To be remembered, to be free, or to never be alone again. Then she faded, like mist evaporating in the morning sun. And Ethan realized the house didn't just whisper, it called. And now it had called him. The next morning, Ethan stood in the nursery again. The mural seemed more vivid now, the trees sharper, the house darker. The phrase, "They never left," seemed newly painted, the brushstrokes fresh. Margaret's voice still echoed in his mind. "We woke them when we built over their bones." He knew now he wasn't losing his mind, at least not entirely. Something lived in this house, beneath it. Something ancient, something buried. Ethan began searching the house's lower levels. The basement was cluttered with dust-choked furniture, rusted tools, crates sealed with iron nails. Near the back wall, he found a hatch, small, square, hidden behind an old armoire. It was locked with a thick, corroded padlock. But nearby, wrapped in burlap and tucked into a hollowed book labeled Holloway Accounts 1890, he found the key. The lock groaned as he turned it. The hatch creaked open to reveal narrow stairs descending into darkness. He hesitated, then stepped down. The air was heavy, moist, cold, and ancient. The walls were stone, slick with condensation. The stairs ended at a crude earthen floor and a long, narrow corridor lined with crumbling brick. The walls bore markings, symbols older than the house, older than language. At the corridor's end stood a heavy wooden door, reinforced with iron. Carved into its center was the same house from the mural, and the phrase, "To forget is to feed." He opened the door. Inside was a chamber. The walls were lined with bones. Not arranged, not honored, piled, thousands of them, human, animal, unmarked and forgotten. At the center sat a stone slab, an altar, stained dark. Something older than the Holloways had used this place, and the family had simply built atop it. He turned to leave, and saw them. Figures, many, standing silently in the corridor behind him. Some wore old-fashioned clothing. Others were little more than silhouettes, flickering at the edges. All were watching him. Among them, Silas. His face was gaunt, hollow, his eyes wide with regret. "They don't want you to leave," he said. "Why me?" Ethan asked. Silas stepped forward, hands out as if to beg. "You saw them." "That's enough. You heard them. That's worse." Margaret appeared beside Silas, looking smaller now, more afraid. "There's a way out," she whispered. "But the house won't like it." Ethan glanced back at the bones, the altar. He felt the walls pulsing, alive, watching, listening. "Tell me how." Margaret pointed upward. In the attic, before the fire, before the deaths, they hid something. Not just bones, names, words, the right words. "A ritual," she nodded. "It won't banish them, but it might open the door. One door. Once." Ethan looked back at the corridor. The figures hadn't moved. They didn't chase him. They didn't need to. The house was patient. Later that night, Ethan ascended to the attic. Dust coated everything, and old trunks were stacked like forgotten coffins. In the far corner, beneath a sheet yellowed with age, he found a chest. Inside, journals wrapped in twine, scorched parchment, and a small box sealed with wax. He broke the seal. Inside, a page, cracked with age, written in a language he couldn't read. But beneath it, in Silas's handwriting, "Speak only once, at midnight, in the light of the house's eye." He didn't know what that meant, but the attic window faced east toward the old clearing where no grass grew. And when he held the parchment to the moonlight, a strange sigil glowed faintly beneath the ink. The house groaned beneath his feet. The hour was close, long before the Holloways bought the land, before walls and windows defined the hilltop. The soil had already been claimed. Centuries ago, older than the first settlers, tribes that roamed this region avoided the clearing completely. They called it Nokusuk, the place that hears. Not haunted, not exactly. The land did not host spirits. It remembered them. It absorbed them. What died there stayed and never truly left. Then came the colonists. In 1691, a Puritan sect splintered off from the Massachusetts Bay Colony and traveled westward, seeking freedom from both the English crown and the emerging settlements. They believed in silence, in secrets, in power beneath the earth. They called themselves the servants of the Hollow Word. Led by a man named Elias Thorne, they settled the hill, building not homes but structures, simple on the surface but beneath each. Hollow rooms, hidden altars, layers of ritual stone. They believed that the earth below them held not hell, but memory, that they could speak to the past, and the past would speak back. But the whispers changed them. The sermons turned strange. Sacrifices began, not always blood, but memory. The servants would bury tokens of people, names carved in bone, stories on parchment soaked in tears. They believed they could trap the essence of a person by forgetting them intentionally and feeding that forgotten truth to the soil. In 1702, the settlement vanished. No graves, no records. Just scorched foundations and silence. The hill sat untouched for nearly 200 years, until 1883, when Charles Holloway, a wealthy industrialist seeking isolation for his mentally ill wife, bought the land cheap. No one wanted it. He tore up what little remained of the old settlement, mistaking the altar stones for colonial foundations. He built his grand house right atop the heart of the old temple. Within a year, his wife was dead, then his son, and then silence again. Each generation that followed buried the truth deeper. Silas Holloway discovered the servants' journals as a teenager, scratched into beams, tucked in books with missing pages, scrawled behind wallpaper. He began to believe the same thing Elias Thorne had, that the house wasn't cursed, it was aware, and it could be bargained with. But when Silas attempted a ritual to speak to his dead sister, the house turned on him. It showed him things, other lives, other memories stolen and consumed, fragments of souls forgotten so deeply they no longer belonged to anyone. His sister was among them, but she didn't remember him. She was hollow, a whisper. He tried to warn his family, but the house silenced him. Each word he spoke twisted in others' ears. His warnings were taken as madness. His pleas became rantings. He died alone, locked in the attic, scratching his final warnings onto the rafters. Ethan now knew the truth. The Holloways hadn't built a cursed house. They'd unearthed one. The structure may have changed, but the foundation remained. The land hadn't forgotten, and every person who lived here fed the memory of the place simply by existing within its walls. Ethan stood in the attic with Silas's notes spread around him. The pages described the original rituals in fragments. To feed the land, forget what you love. To awaken the eye, bury your name. To speak to the hollow, speak with no voice. He turned to the small, wax-sealed box again. Inside was a name, burned into leather. Margaret Holloway. Below it, a needle, a lock of hair, a single baby tooth. He understood now. Each generation had made sacrifices. Not in blood, but in memory. Margaret had forgotten herself to protect the house. Silas had tried to remember and paid for it. And now Ethan had remembered everything, and the house was stirring. Ethan stood at the threshold of the truth, Silas's journals in one hand, the box of Margaret's memory in the other. Outside, the wind howled with unnatural cadence. Inside, the house had begun to breathe. Floorboards rose and fell ever so slightly, as though the building itself had lungs, shallow, ancient, and waiting. The hollow word whispered through the walls. It wanted him to surrender, to feed it what Silas could not. It tempted him with images of his mother's face, her laughter, her voice echoing down the hall. But Ethan clenched his fists. He would not forget. He would not feed the house. He would burn it. He moved quickly. The journals were doused in kerosene and tossed into the living room fireplace. Next, he gathered every object tied to the rituals, Margaret's sealed box, the carved bone tokens, the brittle pages tucked behind frames and baseboards, each one into the flames. The fire roared, unnaturally tall, unnaturally cold. The house screamed, not in sound, but in pressure, like the air thickened with grief. Windows exploded inward, not outward. The temperature plummeted as spectral forms began to manifest in the smoke, vague, flickering shapes of those lost to memory. He saw Silas, his sister, his father. They didn't attack. They watched. Some seemed to smile, others wept. Then the house fought back. Walls bled shadow, long fingers of darkness reaching out with intent. The staircase collapsed behind him, and the floor beneath the attic trapdoor cracked with a sound like snapping bones. Ethan barely rolled away in time. The house was trying to erase him, pull him into its hollow heart, and make him just another whisper in its collection. But he had a plan. In the cellar, beneath the boards Silas had marked with a faint red X, Ethan found the core, the root. A stone slab older than the house, older than the Holloways. It pulsed faintly with light from within, like a sleeping eye beneath ice. Around it, the final remnants of the servants' chapel. Blackened candles, runes scratched into the floor. He poured the last of the kerosene around the stone. The house roared now, no longer whispers but desperate guttural protests. It knew what he was doing. "You're not a god," Ethan growled. "You're a parasite." And he dropped the match. The explosion rocked the foundations. Fire roared through the walls, fed not just by wood, but by memory, centuries of buried sorrow igniting all at once. The shadows screamed, then fractured. The house cracked open like a rotted tooth, belching smoke and half-formed phantoms into the night. And Ethan ran. He barely made it through the front door before the roof caved in behind him. Flames devoured the structure from the inside out. The very hill groaned. And then, silence. Real silence. No whispers. No breathing. Just the wind. Weeks later, investigators called it a gas leak. Locals avoided the hill as they always had, but Ethan knew. The House of Hollow Whispers was gone. But what lay beneath? The ground remained. The roots, the memory. And memory, Ethan had learned, never truly dies. As he walked away from the scorched earth, a single voice whispered behind him, so faint he thought it might have been the wind. "We remember you, Ethan." He didn't turn around, but in the mirror of his car days later, he swore. For just a moment, his reflection blinked a second too late. Epilogue. 6 months later, the hill where the Holloway estate once stood was nothing but scorched earth and tangled ash. Nature, it seemed, wanted no part in reclaiming the land. No birds sang there, no animals crossed the perimeter. Even the grass refused to grow. Locals called it cursed again. No one dared build, no one except the state surveyor assigned to the new bypass project. He arrived on a warm autumn afternoon, clipboard in hand, squinting at blueprints while muttering about soil density. He paused, standing where the old basement had been, now just cracked earth and charred stone. "Strange," he said aloud. "Readings say the ground's unstable, but it feels solid." He crouched, brushing aside the dirt. Stone, black, smooth, almost like obsidian, but warmer. His hand lingered, and just before he pulled away, he felt it. A pulse from deep below. He dropped the clipboard and stumbled backward. The whisper came softly, no louder than a breath, across the nape of the neck. Still, hungry. He left. The bypass project was quietly cancelled the following week. No one ever returned, and beneath the ground, something old and hollow waited. Patient, remembering.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales.